Welcome, everybody. My name is Missy Larson, and I get to be the guest host today. I am currently overseeing collective impact at BonCom and involved in some other great projects here in Utah. But traditionally, or over the years, have been involved in a lot of international business and outlook there, and then on the World Trade Center board. And so I'm grateful to be here today to talk about the trade and tariff briefing, or to be here for the trade and tariff briefing, and to be with you all. And I am not the expert here, so I am going to turn the time over to the expert, to Ben Collender, who is at the World Trade Center, and he will inform us and help us to understand how these tariffs currently, as we know, there is a lot of change, and it's hard to understand what's going on. So Ben can help us understand this a little bit better. If there are questions that come up while you're doing this, there's two ways to ask those. It's best to put them in the Q&A right here on the webinar. You can just add those in and we'll get to those questions. Or if you can't find that, put it in the chat and we'll try to watch both places to get questions answered. I know there are a lot of questions out there. And Ben is working full-time with World Trade Center and in the middle of these all the time. So I'm going to turn the time over to Ben, and he will go into the briefing, and then we'll come back to questions as we go. We also, if you want to throw your questions in, we may stop Ben along the way if he's there in something that makes sense to jump in and ask the questions when he is there just naturally. So thank you all for joining us. I know more will be joining us as we come. We've got quite a few on now, and it is a very high interest. So go ahead, Ben.
All right, thanks, Missy. And it's also great to be here with everyone. I mean, this is such a useful platform. So thanks, Missy, for hosting, and thanks for the Chamber for organizing alongside our team as well to get the latest information out to our collective members. So we use this briefing just as a recap, or for those who haven't joined us before, for a couple of things. One is, what is the latest that we're hearing at the World Trade Center Utah, and what can companies consider as potentially useful tools or options as these tariffs come into place, or nuanced updates that may not be, others may not be well aware of. And then the second thing is, these actions happen so fast. We do a quick rundown of our tariff dashboard and everything that we're tracking there. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and just share some information on some cases we've been dealing with this week that the wider international trade community may be interested in. So the first is a question that we've been getting quite a lot, or an assumption or a comment or some vein of discussion about, I paid this tariff in a window of time that was temporary. It was only a day. We could take the USMCA exclusion, for example. It used to be 25% from March 4th to March 6th to bring something in from Canada or Mexico. But later on March 6th, those goods were excluded. So we're getting a lot of questions around, oh, if these tariffs dropped and I paid it, I can get a refund maybe. I just wanted to highlight this because this puts other tools into context in what your options are as a business. We were going through the frequently asked questions page to make sure we were right on this, but what we're seeing and what we're hearing is CBP, so Customs and Border Protection, which is enforcing these orders, is not able to refund the additional duties paid during these time frames. So that's important. So if you have something, for instance, that crosses the border under 145% or 125%, plus the additional 20 with fentanyl, not to get into too many details there, but the next day it drops to zero, you don't get a refund. And I think that's just important to share because we have been getting some discussion points around that question. The next piece, another case came to us this week. Actually, a couple have been somewhere around this, is We're in that time frame that a lot of companies are looking at the in-transit exemptions. And just wanted to share this language. We had a case come to us this week that there are a lot of gray areas to this that may require an attorney, and I should say that up front. But essentially, they had a planned route that had left the port in China in March before the orders went into place. And it was thought that there was some repairs that needed to happen on a ship, and then later found out that that was not the case. And so the ship had to take a stop along the way and offload goods and put them back on. Now, if that's an emergency ship repair, that's one thing. If it's just a logistics play, that's another. So it's up for interpretation on how that goes. But this is just something to highlight in terms of, one, you should do an in-transit exemption if you can. You shouldn't pay the tariff if you don't have to. If your goods left the port prior to the in its final mode of transportation, prior to the tariff being implemented, you should claim the exemption. If it had some nuanced situation, like a ship broke down or something, we're happy to have that dialogue with you here at World Trade Center Utah and put you in touch with some resources that may be able to help. But each case is a little bit different in nature. I'm also gonna go, second, this bar is in the way. Into briefly a quick update on the foreign trade zone. So we get a lot of questions about the foreign trade zone as a tool to remedy some of these. And I just thought it'd be worth bringing up briefly in this meeting as well. I'm sure, can you see this, Missy? Is our website showing up? So you could see right here, services foreign trade zone on our website at wtcutah.com. You can see all about the foreign trade zone. One thing the foreign trade zone is great for is if your business is located in this area, right here along the Wasatch Front, and the goods that you're importing are later going to be exported, that's the main purpose of the foreign trade zone. If you're going to do something with it and export it, or just re-export it after you've brought it in, it avoids the tariff. Now, if you're going to enter into the US market with the good, the foreign trade zone probably isn't your best tool. Just because the status of these tariffs makes the tariff stick to the good, so to speak. So when it enters US commerce, you're going to pay it if you're using a foreign trade zone. And you're going to pay it at the duty, and this is important, at the rate that it came into the foreign trade zone, not when it's released from the foreign trade zone into the US market. And so just a little bit here, you can contact my colleague Wayne for more information on that tool. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but what I will go into briefly before doing the rundown of the tariff dashboard is the option of a bonded warehouse. So this has been picking up. People maybe have seen this in the press. We've been having cases around this as well, where we have to 100% confirm this, but we're pretty close to it to say, one of the big considerations in all of this tariff discussion is when I bring in a good to the United States, given that I'm not going to get a refund, when it's entered into the commerce here in the United States is when the tariff takes effect and when the tariff sticks to the good. Now, if I don't put it in a foreign trade zone or a bonded warehouse, it's a day it goes in that it's logged as a domestic good in the United States, and that's when the tariff is attached to the good. You have some options, though, with a foreign trade zone and a bonded warehouse. If you use a foreign trade zone, one of the benefits, which is also a downside, is a status called privileged foreign status of a good. So it essentially locks in the tariff at the time of bringing it into the foreign trade zone, which if you're at 145% and you anticipate that going down, that's not a good thing. But if you're at 20% and you anticipate it going up, that is a good thing. And so the foreign trade zone is useful for some of those scenarios, especially locking in that status at the early stage if you think that tariff is going up. Now, a bonded warehouse is the opposite. So you bring in the good And if the tariff is at 145%, privileged foreign status doesn't do the same for a bonded warehouse. So whatever the tariff rate of the good is when you bring it out of the bonded warehouse is what you can anticipate paying. So we've been working on some cases on this as well, where if it's at 145% today, and many of us have heard some discussions around China of, is it going to go down? Is it not? China saying we're not talking to you. The United States is saying we're talking to China. Is this going to come down? We don't know. In all of this, if it does come down, one of the options might be a bonded warehouse. Now, some downsides with the bonded warehouse, and you can see this on my screen. You only get 5 years, where in a foreign trade zone, you have unlimited time. You have storage costs. It also takes about 6 months to set this up. So this is, for a lot of people, if you have to establish a new bonded warehouse, this is a little bit of a longer term play. But it is an option to consider in the tools that you're putting into your tool belt on if the tariffs are higher than they will likely be, and you have to hedge that bet somehow. This is one way to do it. So
Ben, there is a question that came in. Do you have a list of local FTZs that are available to the public? Can you explain how that would work and how they would actually participate in the free trade zone?
yeah, that's great. So that's a great question. So we are the grantee of the Foreign Trade Zone and at World Trade Center Utah. So it's essentially, it's less of a spot that you put your things now and more of an application that you apply to have it put on your site. And so we work that application process, and you can go to our website and reach out to Wayne Coleman if you scroll down to the bottom, and he can have conversations about potentially joining the program. I will say the uptick in demand is quite substantial, and we're keeping up with it right now, as I understand. So Wayne is very responsive about getting back to you, but it's more of a the short is it's more of an application to join a program than it is a regional location of a site, for example, if that makes sense.
So Ben was very instrumental in getting this over to the World Trade Center. It was started in Salt Lake City years ago and went a little bit dormant. And with Ben really being the pusher behind that with Jonathan, have been able to bring that over to the World Trade Center, where it'll be much more effective for the people on this call and for the businesses in Utah being able to access that program for a lot of reasons. There's more information on this. I know they are doing trainings on this and can answer your questions directly. So if any of this, I know it's hard to understand. So I don't know, Ben, do you guys do workshops specifically about the free trade zone?
Yeah, what we found is easiest is because every there are a lot of YouTube videos or things like that, but every company situation is different. So we like to meet with them individually and speak with them about what the benefits of the program are. We have done webinars. We may do some in the future as well. But it's within 15 minutes, we can sit down with you and know pretty well if you're going to qualify or not. And also mentioning, I appreciate you mentioning Salt Lake City, and a shout out to them on their partnership on this. We've invested quite a bit in the tool and transferring it over, so that one of the biggest challenges with the foreign trade zone before was that it was really costly to understand if you to know if you qualified as a business and what the process was. And now we've brought in a resource in my colleague Wayne to basically handhold companies through the application process and not charge wild consulting fees, but rather have it as more or less public service for Utah companies wishing to learn more about the program.
And will you just do a quick reminder of how that connects back to these tariff discussions and why they would want to have that discussion right now? Well, some people may want to have that discussion right now about the free trade zone.
Yeah, I mean, what a foreign trade zone does briefly is it think of it like an island that is not in the United States where you place your goods in holding, right? So you're not, if you have a good that you're bringing in that is going to have 145% tariff, but you work your logistics from the United States and just export it later to Canada, and there's no tariff from Canada to China, it's like it never touched US soil, right? So you never end up paying the tariff in that situation. So there are other situations where if you're a manufacturer and you bring something in to several parts into one product and put it all together and then export it as well, it's another way to avoid the tariff. Now, if it enters the US commerce, it's going to get a little tricky, but we can walk through that. There are oftentimes savings on things like weekly entry, that really make the program interesting beyond just those savings as well. So it gets a little complex and it takes a minute and you have to understand a specific company, but it's pretty quick once you understand what the operations of a company are to say, hey, well, let's think of it this way. And so we have that resource to help.
It makes a difference with some companies, probably some of you on this call, in big ways to the bottom dollar and to your profitability. So it's this is one of the tools that the World Trade Center offers, and it's a critical one for those of you that fit that criteria. So
Great, thanks. I'm going to transition to the dashboard and some updates. Last week, we had a very brief update to say, hey, these things were released. You should be aware. But, we have a little bit more time this week to go into some of the details on new tariff actions that are taking place at the federal level. So a couple of things. One is our dashboard is also a resource. So you can see up here at the top, wtcutah.com/tariffs. You can see a full rundown of all of the latest tariff actions that we're tracking. And it's really what we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from a lot of stakeholders in our community is essentially you could see in a clean way what the latest tariff actions are and what the resources are. So whether it's an announcement, an executive order, the fact sheet, the Federal Register, these things typically, not always, but typically go in flow that, when the CSMS hits from customs, it normally comes with an implementation or an effective date associated with it. So this flow kind of gives you a real-time resource list that says where this tariff action is at in the process. So the last action for this 232 for critical minerals, for example, is that Federal Register was issued for public comment. And so that public comment is open now. And so if you're in the critical mineral industry, you're encouraged to provide comment on some of these potential tariffs coming for critical minerals and processed derivative products for critical minerals. So this basically is a quick scan that you could do to see what the latest actions are. Now, this dashboard goes, as you can see, these are the actions under the Trump administration. It gets quite lengthy. What we're working on doing is separating this out by region and by industry. But for now, this is organized by when the latest action took place. We did have a request earlier this week to add, even though it wasn't this administration, to add the 301s that hit right before this administration in the fall and winter. And so those are on here as well. So if you are looking at what's a harmonized tariff schedule, how do I stack my tariffs? You often hear the 145% for China, which we can go to right here. The 145%, including fentanyl. Like, how do I stack that with the 301? Well, you could basically go in here, see if your good is exempted. If not, it's included. And then you add that to the fentanyl, 20% fentanyl, and then you add the 301 tariffs. So a little bit complicated, I know, to walk through it, but it's at least you have the resources in one place on the dashboard now, including the previous 301 cases coming in from China right before this administration came in. So to give a quick rundown of the latest actions, we mentioned critical minerals. That was just open for public comment yesterday. One of the surprising actions, or surprising to me at least, I don't know if everybody else was tracking this, but trucks came in on an investigation But I believe it's tied to the autos executive order, but it got its own standalone investigation just for trucks. And so that was put into the system and is also receiving public comment as of today, actually. Um, we talked briefly about de minimis, and just as a heads up, this typically we hear a lot of feedback from consumers, so there are some cases where this does apply to businesses. We heard last week about wedding bells and bringing those in. This does apply to businesses, but it's typically some of the smaller businesses that are involved in de minimis shipments. Those come into place next week. On May 2nd is when the enforcement begins. So just something to be aware of. And we have more details here in the link. There was also some discussion about what level will this be enforced, and everything that we're seeing in the CSMS right now says that this is going to be at the package level. And so if you have 5 items in a package, it seems like that from the language that we could see that that's going to be enforced at the package level. And those are the major updates. De minimis hitting next week. And we have, if you're involved in ship building, there is a 301, or this actually applies to quite a bit of folks. And people should be, it's not just shipbuilding, sorry. We should be looking at these quite substantially, because when these come through, they may have drastic impacts on our business community. Essentially, what it is potential tariffs, and it's under study right now. Or no, this one's in effect. We have, I'm sorry, see, we have all these resources here. There are details here that outline if you're bringing in goods from a Chinese operator or Chinese vessel, you're going to have certain fees associated with it. Now, the implementation of this one doesn't begin until October, but it's something that if you're making decisions now, it's probably pretty useful to be paying attention. And we have all the information. I won't go through it in detail here, but all the port fees that are associated with it. It's not one of those that's a tariff directly, but you may be paying it to bring in goods because the ships will be charged it, and they may charge you as a surcharge or have some way of passing that through to the end user. So again, that's for Chinese vessels or Chinese operators of vessels coming in. So those are the major updates that we were tracking from last week to share with the group. If others have heard of additional updates that we should include or want to discuss, we're happy to do that. We did hear a little bit about tomatoes from Mexico. It's not included on our dashboard, but we are going to include a link that basically tracks anti-dumping, because that's a mechanism that isn't an executive order or some administrative procedure so much as an International Trade Commission decision on anti-dumping and duties assessed for those activities. So we will track that, but not as an individual line item. So we'll include a link and update everybody in a future session on that as well. And with that, I'll stop with the update and see if we have any other questions.
Yeah, if you have questions, you're welcome to put them either in the Q&A or over in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I know that 30 minutes isn't going to answer all of your business questions about how these tariffs might affect you. But I think more important, Ben showed you some of the resources that are available on the World Trade Center's website that you can go into. If you have questions about that, and Ben, maybe just do a quick overview of how people get a hold of you, how they reach out, how they talk about their specific circumstances around their business and tariffs.
Yeah, so we have on our webpage, there are great resources on the pages that I was showing. Let me see if I can share my screen again. There are a couple of easy ways. I like to say there's really no wrong door with the World Trade Center Utah. So here at the bottom, if you go all the way to the bottom of this long list, which we hopefully can shorten as well, there are a couple of ways to contact us. One is if you're looking for advisory on market access or planning ahead, managing risk, We have our business advisory team that you can reach out to, that there's some information here. And the foreign trade zone, you can either go to the bottom of the tariff page and click on this, and it goes straight to our colleague Wayne Coleman. You can also go under services for either one of those. So it's either at the bottom of the tariff webpage or there that you can access how to reach us in an easy way. But you can
Awesome.
also reach out to, if you have a contact already at the World Trade Center, reach out. We're really good about internal coordination, and we'll get you into the right place. We don't expect you to know exactly perfectly who to go to, or, inside the organization. So.
Yeah, I know that Utah is really ahead on this, on being able to have a resource like World Trade Center Utah, to respond to a lot of the questions that are coming up. So please take advantage of it, and know that they're a great team over there. So I don't see any other questions that came in. So Ben, your information was so good that you didn't leave anybody wondering. Oh, wait, there is one. What's Utah's position with Washington about the tariffs? I don't know if you can answer that, because you're not really Utah's spokesperson. I think the governor might have to, but
Yeah,
whatever you're willing to.
I won't try to say what the state of Utah is, but one thing I can do is share briefly with this group a process that we walked through, and the chamber was such a great partner. Oh, this is a dated version. That's okay. It still has the main bulk of the conversation here. So when we heard these tariffs were coming into place, or when the administration was coming in, we knew that tariffs were a possibility. We quickly convened some of the most impacted or potential impacted in our business community. And we wanted to have a conversation around what the impact is, how we can position as a state. And what we heard really quickly from the business community is that these tariffs come with a lot of risks. There's a lot of uncertainty. And our competitiveness as the United States is dependent on getting this right. In terms of, if you're going to make an investment, you have to have some level of certainty about what the future holds, how you're going to source for your supply chains, what that looks like. So our position is anything that we can do to have a conversation alongside the chamber that helps mitigate the risks, create some level of certainty, and create global competitiveness is going to only add value. And just as a walkthrough of some of those examples, providing advance notice, the section 232 and 301 tariffs do this quite a bit. You have to go through a process that sort of gives businesses a heads up that this is coming, and it invites public feedback, whereas the IEEPA tariffs, the emergency declaration ones, do not, and they're pretty quick and they're pretty acute and painful for the business community. If you ordered something prior to the start date of a tariff, it's tough to consume that cost because you have to figure out how to get it financed. That maybe is a real consideration for folks. Having the payment all be at once is really tough as well. And then being able to, manufacture in a foreign trade zone without this tariff passing through is mainly the purpose that the program was created in the first place. So those are some of the key considerations in terms of our position on it. The state of Utah doesn't get to make the decisions on the tariffs, but one of the things that we can do is help advise on what we're seeing from businesses, and that's mainly the feedback that we've received so far.
That's awesome. There's one more question that came, and that's small diaper wipes business, importing, manufacturing in China. The question, are there common countries that we believe won't be affected as largely as China?
Right now, so I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but the way that I really think about these tariffs is in three buckets, because you could sort of understand the risk associated a little bit better when bucketing into these three buckets. The first is China, and China is very uncertain because we haven't really started the conversation and had a lot of dialogue around what are these tariffs going to come down from 145%, and sometimes with 301 tariffs on top of that. We saw it was announced 245%, but that was an old 301 tariff plus the 145. So that did not escalate to 245 if you saw that in the news. So China is a lot of uncertainty and currently high tariffs. Then you have Canada and Mexico. Canada and Mexico are interesting, and I'll share my screen again on this. Canada and Mexico are interesting because if you can see right here, there's currently a USMCA exclusion on tariffs for goods that come in and qualify as a USMCA good from Canada and Mexico. That's about the only free ticket on tariffs right now, is if it comes in through USMCA and it's a qualified good. So the challenge is with USMCA that, you know, a place like Mexico currently may be better to source from than China because of this, but the renegotiations for USMCA is due next year. And so that's one of the uncertainties in shifting operations or sourcing to Mexico. And the last bucket is sort of the rest of the world. And this one, we anticipate some updates here. There's the 90-day pause, which we're projecting to end on July 8th. And right now, a lot of the countries are coming to the table and having negotiations. We don't know what those details are, and haven't been released yet, but we anticipate another round of sort of global tariff announcements based on the negotiations. And so there's a lot of uncertainty that plays down to, okay, the rest of the world, but they're sort of in this category of they're coming to the table to negotiate. Let's see how it plays out. But we do have some certainty around China, which is kind of high right now, but we have some uncertainty on if it's going to come down. And we have some certainty around USMCA, which is currently low, but could go up. So I know we're 2 minutes past, but
Well, and the
hopefully.
best thing, keep coming to these updates, and if you've got specific questions, reach out to the World Trade Center. They can help you answer those. Grateful for everybody here. We've gone just a minute or two over, so I am going to let everybody jump to their next meeting. But Ben, thank you so much for your expertise and for all of the work that you're doing in the World Trade Center in behalf of Utah business. And grateful to have you all here today.
Thanks, Missy.
Have a great day and a great weekend.